All right, so Craig, California, the ACC, we've been through what they've done. We started with Boston College. I was out of pocket on Friday. The Cal Bears from the Pac-12 to the ACC and dissect their schedule.
Yeah, so Cal, obviously a team that was enjoying, I guess enjoy is maybe not the right word, that experienced its first year in the ACC. The weird cross-country trips are now going to become commonplace, and so they got that under their belt and actually did okay for themselves ultimately, not really an ACC play, just 2-6 in conference, but did muster up enough wins to make it to a bowl game, finish 6-7, so now it's a matter of, what does year two look like for Cal in the ACC? And I don't quite know what to expect, but we do have the schedule to at least tinker with and look around. So Justin Wilcox and company, I guess, like for anybody just watching, this is not a full-on breakdown. This isn't a season preview. This is just a look at the schedule. So we'll mention things here and there, but we're not focusing in on, like, they've lost 4 O-linemen and they've had second – like that's just all for later. So this in general, though, I will say the obviously big thing that did happen to Cal this offseason right off top that's worth mentioning was obviously losing Fernando Mendoza, their very talented quarterback, to Indiana. So that was a move that Cal had to deal with. But here is their schedule for 2025. They will open up things with a familiar foe out of the former Pac friendship there. Partnership as Oregon State is up first on the schedule for the Cal Golden Bears as they look to return to the postseason. So traveling to Corvallis on the first weekend of the schedule, and so that ought to be a very familiar road trip, I would think, for some Cal fans, and just a nice little return to what was normalcy there for a little while, playing a team close to home. So you get the first game of the year there against Oregon State, then move on and you take on Texas Southern in the following week, as that sure will pay to beat them up game, basically is what that is. So to Corvallis in week number 1 for an All-Pac matchup, then Texas Southern at home, and then giving them a pretty spicy non-conference schedule. You have Minnesota there in week number 3 on September the 13th. So the Golden Gophers out of the Big Ten. And then you have on September the 20th, this first full month of non-conference games, you have San Diego State on the road, which will be a Pac-12 school here in the near future. But obviously Cal's not in that league any longer. But there you go. There's a little bit of a West Coast flavor on the first and back half of that non-con schedule. So a trip to Corvallis, Texas Southern at home, Minnesota at home, and then a trip to San Diego to take on the Aztecs.
That's manageable. I don't know what to expect for them either. I don't, losing the quarterback and with Wilcox the head coach. We're not doing that. You drop your head like I'm disappointed with what I said. I don't really know what to expect from them. So I don't know if that's a good matchup, Oregon State or Minnesota, or not.
Yeah, I wasn't doing it for that reason. I was just looking over your direction. But regardless, going into the conference schedule on September the 27th, at Boston College is how they will open things up in ACC play. So BC right out of the gates. Still no break at this schedule. Then on the 4th of October, it will be Duke as you get the Blue Devils there and a couple of ACC games under your belt. So 6 games in a row. And then you will have the bye week. So finally, a bye week. Now, the interesting thing about this schedule for Cal is...
What's up? We outside. Having fun doing what I want, cause you know the sun beating down kinda like a drum. Look how I do it. Look how I do it.
Another beautiful day out there, folks, so get out there, but don't forget your sunscreen. UV is
I just wanna have a good time. It's all on me. Pleasure's mine. The weatherman said it's the right time, so we gon' get it jumping till the night time. We gon' get it. We gon' get it. We gon' get it. We gon' get it. We outside. Yeah, I might just take a dive with it, feel alive with it, ride with it, cause I'm fly with it. Loud with the trouble, loud with the bass. No cloud.
games. They still don't have a firm date. At last I looked, and let me double-check real quick. Okay, so they do have that now. That North Carolina game, meeting up with Bill Belichick and company, they'll have a couple of weeks to prepare for that. And it will be North Carolina and Cal on Friday, October the 17th. So a Friday game for the Golden Bears. And it will be 2 in a row for them as they will travel to Blacksburg, Virginia the following Friday, October the 24th. Back-to-back Friday games, Tar Heels and Hokies. So very interesting back-to-back Fridays. I'm not sure that anybody else in the country has that on their schedule. So they'll have, like I said, a week between Duke and North Carolina to get that situated and get ready for the pair of back-to-back Friday games. Then on Saturday, November the 1st, you will have Virginia at home. November the 8th, another Saturday, it'll be at Louisville. And then your second bye week. So bit of a long stretch to start the year. Then you get that first bye week, second week of October, first bye week, second week of October, and then second bye week, third week of November. So it's a bit of a spread out schedule, but leaves very little on the back end, just 2 games there to close things out after the Louisville game and then a bye. It'll be Saturday, November 22nd. Go to Stanford in a weird West Coast ACC game that we're still getting used to. And then on Saturday, November the 29th, it'll be SMU at home for Cal to close things on out. So, yeah, opening up Oregon State on the road and then closing out with SMU, and just not a schedule that a Cal fan would have understood at all about 2.5, 3 years ago. But it is the schedule they have now, and so that's a look at where they are. Trips to Louisville, Stanford, Virginia Tech, Boston College, San Diego State, Oregon State. So you've got some interesting places to go to. But you are doing a lot of traveling as well. So you'll have 6 home games, 6 road games, a pair of Friday games, and then the rest on Saturday.
I'm trying to still, and I know I need to, but I put my head around the fact they play Cal. That's the 119th meeting between those two schools. They've been playing since 1892. And then you mentioned SMU because they're a part of the ACC, but it's still like the old school Pac-12 game, and then there's SMU. Louisville and Virginia Tech. It's still kind of, when it comes to Cal and Stanford, I think I've come to grips with everybody else that's moved, but the Cal-Stanford, not SMU, but the Cal-Stanford in the ACC is still something for me to still kind of maybe find my way through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's unique, that's for sure. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
No, I mean, unless you have anything to add on that. I mean, it's, we've had a whole year under our belts of the Cal-Stanford thing, but I can see where that's still taking some people to get used to.
Let me make it clear. I'll make it. All of the other realignment with Oregon and UCLA and USC and teams that have moved into Washington to the Big Ten, my mind's okay with that, and I'm done with that. That's the way it is. Texas and OU in the SEC, the teams in the Big 12, all of that to me makes sense. SMU even in the ACC, that makes sense. But I'm still at times struggling with the Stanford Cal inside of the ACC. And it was just the way you were talking about those last few games. When you talk about you have Stanford, your longtime 100 and nearly 20-year rival, and then there's SMU to close out the conference schedule with a home game. Those are the two teams that I'm still just not quite so locked in on, that they are in a different conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unique, and it's not the geography that we grew up with, but it's the geography that the TV networks and the money makers wanted. So that's the types of games that we get now and the types of conferences that we have now, and remains to be seen of what that will look like in the future. I guess that could change, although I don't know that, Cal will want to go back to a Pac-12 that has a San Diego State in it or schools like that. So maybe they're in the ACC for the long haul, and 10 years from now it's just like reading the back of your hand. It's just normal. But, yeah, I can see where it's still just sort of strange for a lot of people to see some games that would be conference games as non-con games, and some games that you just never expected would be conference games have you traveling out across the country.
MC Gusto saying 3-9 for Cal. That's his note on what they might finish. Bowl prediction, Justin Wilcox against South Carolina. That's from Jim. when it comes to a bowl game. So there's a couple of responses. Your pet cat meow, winning at at North Carolina should be easy. That's late in the year. That's in mid-October.
That's also at home.
Belichick's got that's a home game, but that Belichick may have maybe what he needs by then. Kind of got his team the way he wants them, at least how they're playing. But yeah, that is a home game. Duke at home, Minnesota. They're always just good. They're not great. They're not really good, but they're always pretty good. That'll be an interesting game early on for them, a test. And, of course, anytime you're going to take on a former Pac-12 team like Oregon State, that has some emotions to it, too.
I think the road schedule's pretty fun. I don't know how well Cal fans really travel, especially cross-country, but going to Oregon State ought to be good. Going to San Diego State ought to be good. Going to Boston, that should be cool. Blacksburg, unique atmosphere. Don't know how high the spirit levels are at this point, but it is a trip that somebody like me growing up watching college football in the 90s and 2000s would have enjoyed. And then to Louisville, not a bad trip. To Stanford, I think the road games are pretty kick-ass as far as if you want to travel and go someplace cool. I think you pretty much knocked it out of the park in terms of options. And then the home slate leaves a little bit to be desired. I just don't know how Cal fans are going to feel about Texas Southern. I do know. They won't care. Minnesota, there's some Big Ten flavor there. Duke, I don't know what that, I don't know if they get excited about that. North Carolina with Belichick, that ought to be cool on a Friday night. Virginia, kind of whatever. And then SMU is probably kind of whatever as well, but maybe SMU's fighting for a playoff spot again, and so that would make that a game with a bit more impact. But they do lose Mendoza, and that's a big piece. And there's other details-wise, but like I said, we'll get to that later on in the summer, but Mendoza's worth mentioning right off the top because that was a very good player for you, and now a playoff team went and scooped him up with all that Big Ten money in Indiana, so Kurt Signetti got him a pretty good replacement for Curtis Rourke, and I'm anxious to see how that goes. But Cal, based on this and not knowing a ton about them just yet, I think bowl game, they're probably flirting with that. I know it doesn't translate 6 and 7, but that's about, that's where they finished, and I don't think they're necessarily better. So, I think bowl game with this schedule is probably the goal, and then anything beyond that, I don't know that you're probably getting too ahead of yourself.
The Minnesota-Cal series, they've played 6 times, and I like when I see a game like that I don't know much about. There's certain Stanford-Cal, we know that. Certain rivalries, we know that they've been playing for a long, long time, but they've only played 6 times. I have no idea about any of that history other than Cal's won 4 of those 6 games. Sometimes there might be a non-conference game or even now with the changes in the conference where somebody's going to play somebody else, and they did a lot of. But in that particular case, no, they have not played Minnesota much with just 6 times, the last time in 2009.